how cool is this?
The Supreme Court will be taking up a gun rights case.
Members of the Senate are focusing on gun rights.
Major ruling involving the Second Amendment.
The Supreme Court has just issued a major ruling.
Major Second Amendment case.
Major Supreme Court ruling.
There is a difference between states deciding how they want to regulate any number of things versus stripping people of their rights to self-defense.
It's a case that legal experts will be watching closely.
Public. And today, the Supreme Court has answered that question by a vote of 6-3.
An appeals court has thrown out California's ban on high-capacity ammunition magazines.
Struck down a statewide ban on firearm magazines holding more than 10 rounds.
San Francisco-based Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned California's ban on high-capacity gun magazines, saying it violates the Second Amendment.
Ninth Circuit ends California ban on high-capacity magazines.
California cannot ban gun owners from having high-capacity gun magazines. A federal judge struck down the California law.
Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has overturned California's ban on high-capacity magazines, saying it violates the Second Amendment.
Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has thrown out California's ban on high-capacity ammunition magazines.
Judge panel ruled that the state's ban on magazines holding more than 10 bullets strikes at the core of the right to bear arms.
A three-judge panel ruled that the state's ban on magazines holding more than 10 bullets strikes at the core of the right to bear arms.
The panel's majority ruled Friday that the law banning magazines holding more than 10 bullets violates the constitutional right to bear arms.
You might want to sit down for this one. The Supreme Court just dropped a decision that's sending shockwaves across America. Something that was once considered restricted in half the country is now officially protected by the Constitution. High-capacity magazines, the kind long debated in political circles and banned in multiple states, have just been declared fully legal under the Second Amendment. And that's just the start, because what this ruling triggered in the market, in state governments, and even in Washington, D.C., is something no one's ever seen before. The moment the decision was announced, gun stores were flooded. Orders surged so fast that some websites crashed. Manufacturers couldn't keep up. It wasn't fear buying this time, it was victory buying. In a 6-3 decision earlier this year, the Supreme Court struck down all magazine capacity restrictions. The majority opinion, written by Justice Clarence Thomas, stated that no historical precedent existed for limiting how much ammunition a firearm could hold. The ruling made it clear Americans have the right to own arms that are in common use, and with over 100 million standard capacity magazines already owned across the country, the court decided there's nothing uncommon about them. But here's where it gets wild. The ruling didn't just stop at magazines. The language the court used, reaffirming the so-called Bruen standard, effectively opened the door for challenges to nearly every modern gun law in the U.S. that includes assault weapon bans, waiting periods, registration lists, and even certain federal restrictions.
Justice's ruling this morning, it conflicts with the Second Amendment's right to bear arms.
And today, the Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. That puts a limit on the right to have a gun.
My response to that is that's the same claptrap that they have been using for 20 years.
You couldn't get a firearm and carry it just because you wanted to be protected against criminals. We won't see changes overnight, but it's going to be quick.
Everybody has a right, if they're a responsible adult.
The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
There's nothing in the Second Amendment that says that you can ban magazines or any crucial part of a firearm.
Red dot optic is just like this magazine. It makes the firearm more dangerous when it's misused, but it also makes the firearm work better.
Any law enforcement officers in California, including feds, you are absolutely prohibited from enforcing restricted magazines ownership in California, regardless of when they were purchased.
High-capacity gun magazines will remain legal in California.
A federal court struck down California's ban on high-capacity gun magazines.
A federal judge ruled California's ban on magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds is unconstitutional.
Overnight, attorneys general from states like California and New York scrambled to downplay the decision, but behind closed doors, their legal teams knew the reality. Decades of gun control laws just got put on the chopping block. Within 72 hours, multiple lawsuits were filed across federal courts using this very ruling as ammunition to challenge existing laws. Within 2 days of the decision, Brownells reported a 340% jump in magazine sales. PMAGS sold out in hours. Palmetto State Armory's website crashed twice from unprecedented traffic. And that was only the beginning. AR-15 sales spiked 280% nationwide in the week following the decision. Buyers in states that had previously banned certain rifles, like California and Massachusetts, rushed to get their hands on firearms that had been off limits for years. One Texas distributor said they moved more inventory in 5 days than in an entire quarter. Meanwhile, the FBI's background check system processed more than 2 million checks in just 2 weeks, nearly double the same period last year. But this wasn't panic buying, it was celebration. For many, it felt like the Constitution was finally working for them, not against them. Ammunition sales soared too. Winchester, Federal, and Hornady all reported massive back orders. For the first time in decades, it wasn't fear of bans driving demand, it was enthusiasm. Here's what shocked industry analysts most. Nearly 40% of all firearm purchases after the ruling were from first-time buyers. And this wasn't 2020 all over again. There wasn't a pandemic or political unrest. These were people who felt legally empowered for the first time to exercise a right they'd always been told was limited. Women made up an all-time high 42% of new buyers. Gun store owners in previously restrictive states said half their customers had never owned a gun before. Competitive shooters started buying magazines in bulk. Hunters upgraded to semi-automatics with standard capacity magazines for better predator control. Even off-duty law enforcement officers began purchasing personal use firearms in record numbers. It wasn't just a sales boom, it was a cultural shift.
It could be used to strike down the entire ban, which would allow Californians to buy high-capacity magazines.
State's ban on high-capacity gun magazines.
If a magazine can be considered an arm or not, the attorney representing
71-page decision where he talked about the fact that, hey, a magazine is a necessary part of a firearm, and therefore it is protected by the Second Amendment.
U.S. District Judge declaring California's ban on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds of ammunition unconstitutional.
Gators Custom Guns in Cowlitz County argued that magazines are essential and a common part of a firearm, therefore a protected right.
Of course, not everyone's celebrating. Some states immediately tried to find loopholes around the ruling. California's Attorney General announced plans to create legislative workarounds. New York floated the idea of requiring micro-stamping on all new firearms, a proposal that critics called a disguised ban since the technology barely exists. Illinois tried to redefine what a magazine even is, hoping to dodge the ruling entirely, but federal courts weren't buying it. A Maryland district court quickly blocked the state's assault weapon ban, citing the Supreme Court's decision. New Jersey's magazine ban is currently under injunction. Massachusetts was forced to suspend its handgun roster because it couldn't meet the new constitutional test. One by one, entire state-level regulatory systems are collapsing under judicial review. Gun rights organizations are strategically targeting courts where they know judges will uphold the Supreme Court's logic, and they're winning. While state courts scramble, Congress is quietly gearing up for the next phase. Republican lawmakers have introduced a bill that would cut off federal funding to any state caught enforcing laws already ruled unconstitutional. That means states like California and New York could lose millions in law enforcement grants if they ignore court rulings. Meanwhile, some Democratic senators are pushing for a Firearm Safety Compliance Act that would require federal approval for all state gun laws, essentially setting national standards for gun control, even if the Supreme Court says otherwise. Neither proposal is guaranteed to pass, but the fact that both are even on the table shows how massive this judicial earthquake really is. And then there's another bill that's quietly gaining support. The Hearing Protection Act. It would remove suppressors from the National Firearms Act altogether, treating them like regular firearm accessories. Lawmakers are using the same constitutional logic. If suppressors are in common civilian use, they're protected. Economists estimate it could generate over $200 million a year in new industry revenue and increase suppressor ownership sixfold within 5 years. The economic consequences of this decision are just as big as the legal ones. Standard capacity magazines that used to sell for $50 or more in restricted states are now down to $15. AR-15 prices have stabilized after the initial surge, but manufacturers are scaling up for long-term growth. Buyers in states where restrictions are lifting are now paying 30 to 40% less because they no longer need compliance models. Homeowners insurance companies in some states are even offering small discounts to gun owners who take certified safety courses, citing reduced risk of burglary. And get this, financial advisors are starting to treat firearms and ammunition as inflation-resistant assets, Collectors are establishing gun trusts to legally pass on their firearms without future legal headaches. The concealed carry insurance market has nearly tripled in size since the decision. This isn't just a policy shift, it's a full-blown economic ecosystem being rebuilt in real time. If you live in a state where laws are being challenged, you're now part of a waiting game. Some people are buying now, hoping to lock in their rights while courts sort through the chaos. Others are waiting for clarity, but one thing is clear. The Supreme Court just redrew the map. Every gun control law from the last half-century is now under legal threat. And whether you're for or against it, this isn't just about firearms, it's about constitutional power, federal versus state authority, and how much control the government really has over individual rights. What's happening right now goes far beyond sales or lawsuits. It's a redefinition of the American identity itself. For years, the gun debate has been framed as a political tug of war, but this ruling has shifted it into something deeper, a conversation about freedom, personal defense, and the limits of government. In gun stores across the country, people who never considered themselves gun people are buying their first firearm. In courts, lawyers are rewriting the arguments they've used for decades. And in living rooms, families are having conversations they've never had before about what it means to actually exercise a constitutional right. It's not fear that's driving it now, it's empowerment. The next few months are going to decide everything. New lawsuits, new legislation, and new precedents will either cement this ruling as a historic victory or spark the biggest legal showdown over gun rights since the founding of the country. And regardless of where you stand on the issue, one fact remains. The balance of power between citizens and government has just shifted dramatically. For decades, gun owners were told their rights had limits. Today, those limits are being rewritten, not by politicians, but by the highest court in the land. This isn't just another political story, it's history unfolding right in front of us. Because when the Supreme Court speaks, every state, every lawmaker, and every citizen has to listen. And this time, they didn't just speak, they roared.